2, 1. The intended trends and movements to raise the progressive value might only result in hindering the progressiveness of the art and trends itself. The context of progressive value here in our case, we believe it is about how right now people and the society are progressing to embrace the vulnerable actors or the minorities in the status quo, which are, but not limited to, firstly, people who belong to the LGBTQ plus community, secondly, indigenous people, and thirdly, people who embraces equality in the sense of gender identity. We believe that the general problem in the status quo that demands us to regret this trend is because this art trend wouldn't be effective for the intended people on the progressiveness, which in this case are the minorities, because at the end of the day, firstly, this trend will only be a sticker for promotion purposes, therefore this would only lead into the other problems, which are secondly, it would hinders the creativity of the vulnerable actor due to the race-oriented arts. Thirdly, it would only incentivize the inequality and racism itself. And lastly, at the end of the day, the credit of making will only go to the non-minority creator. So what this side of the house will do is, as the government who are obliged to give the best condition for the status quo, we want to follow the mechanism of incentivizing minorities to make their own art to satisfy the needs of them and to fulfill the progressive value itself. Now, moving on to my arguments, 3 points that I'm going to explain in this speech is firstly about what happened in the status quo that leads this policy to happen, and secondly, why is this proposal or policy regrettable, and lastly, why our alternative is better to improve the status quo. Moving on to the first arguments, which is what happened in the status quo. Well, in the status quo, what happened is that minorities doesn't really have the big platform to represent who they are as the community, which in this case, you can see how back then most of the Disney princesses or superheroes are white, and even if they got some kind of like racial mixes in them, the set of the art are basically in the majority set, or how they are basically or all heteros or all cis, like and or again, but the majority set like how the some superhero lives like in New York, Chicago, or etc., and how they are white. And this leads into what the minorities and people who support the minorities wanted, which are a minority-oriented arts and equality for them in the sense of art. And they also want the credits for the minority actors or art makers. For example, on what happened with the hashtag of Oscar is so white, and that would lead into why is the proposal of making progressive valued art are actually regrettable and won't solve this problem at all. At the end of the day, the progressive values, which in this case are equality, that are meant to make through this proposal, are not attained because, firstly, the credits won't be acquired by the minority. Being the main actor doesn't contribute that much because the actor was made by non-minority. For example, if we are talking about Superman, for example, and if people are making the Superman as a black person or as a gay man, then while people will take a look and how the minorities are like in being involved in the creation or in the reimagination of these characters, at the end of the day, it would only um, it will the credit would only be given most the credit would only be given to people who made the original characters because which in this case are huge agency, for example, like Disney or Marvel, which are a white company, and they would all get the most money and credits, etc. We believe that the whole system of reimagination is actually very harmful for the vulnerable actors in this case because it is only a replacement for characters that are already there. It is a replacement for characters that already suited for the majority of people or the majority representation in the status quo. So what we believe would be better to represent um, the the vulnerable actors here is to encourage the minorities to make their own art that would suit them better, that would represent their themselves better. Um, so why would our proposal, which is the incentivizing of minorities, would be a better alternative to improve our status quo? Well, firstly, it won't only be a sticker for promotion purposes, which in this case was what happened with people who are slandered by the minorities, or people who support the minorities because they only make characters or like art that would support the majority. For example, how J.K. Rowling was slandered because every character from Harry Potter is would only represent the majority, and how it doesn't really represent the minorities, like how Cho Chang is considered racist or and other things like that. But and now what happened is that J.K. Rowling tried to make all of their character as a character that would represent the minorities more to feel their progressive value even more, which in the end of the day this would only be a stickers for promotion purposes. They don't really care, they don't really know about the core value of this, what the minorities wanted. They wouldn't really know about what the progressive value is. They are only doing this for promotion purposes. But what if we incentivize minorities to make their own art, because they would know better about what they wanted, because they would know better about the core value of their progressiveness and what they represent as themselves? The created art would suit it even more, and it would fit and tackle what the vulnerable actors here wanted and how they want to represent themselves. And therefore, it wouldn't really incentivize racism, because it wouldn't lead, and the credits of making would go into them because they are the one who made it. May I again emphasize what we are talking about here is about the reimagination, which is only a replacement and not an actual art created to represent or intended for the minorities people as a whole. So um and this would also not hinders the creativity for people, either it is from the minorities or from the majorities, because it wouldn't be a race oriented art. It wouldn't be made to suit what the majorities think would be better for the minorities themselves. And therefore, this house believes that the incentivizing for minorities to make their own art is better than the progressive reimagination art, and we are very proud to propose. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, first staff. Next, first name.
Hello, am I audible?
Oh, yes.
Okay, just tell me if if I sound like robotic or whatsoever it is. Since we are talking about progressivity, I'm sorry if there are any words that is triggering you or something. That is not my intention. So I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Before going to my argument, there are two rebuttals toward the government side of the House. First, talking about they want to prevent the inequality and racism by incentivizing the minority to establish their own art. And the second, regarding to their credit to agency, for example, if they create Superman turn into gay men, the credited will goes to Disney itself. So going to my first rebuttal toward preventing the inequalities itself, right? We think if they are talking about incentivizing the minority to establish their own art, we think it also happen under a side of the House, right? We don't ban those kind of minority to actually establish their own art, right? Even if in our side of the House we are limited those kind of thing, we think this is fine, right? Because our goal is to create the progressivity, because we think reimagination art can attach more people since there are famous movies or famous art, right? Meanwhile, in their side of the House, the moment that they don't do this kind of reimagination art, we think what will happen is that it's not no progressivity, right? Because people is going to normalize the patriarchal society that has in the Cinderella itself. So that's why the inequality, the patriarchal society will access under the side of the House, and they don't prevent those kind of inequality and racism at the very first place. Second, regarding to the credit toward the agency itself, right? We think this kind of credit is not going to those Disney only, right? Because we think this kind of thing is also giving toward the credit toward this kind of main actor or the people that actually establish this kind of art itself, right? Even if in outside of the house, this kind of credit is not going to be is not going to happen under the outside of the house, and the credit is going to Disney, it is okay, right? And we are happy that if this kind of credit is going to Disney, because Disney will happy toward us, right? Because they think our progress or our movement is the one that give contribution toward them, right? We are the one that giving them the benefit, so they are willing to they are willing and happy to give us a credit, to give us an exposure, and they are happy to make a lot of LGBT movie, or for example the feminist movie, right? So that's why they can educate people through their side of through their movie itself, right? So what is our goal under outside of the house today? We want to giving empowerment toward the people who are seek for progressivity through this kind of reimagination art. Why then our goal is very important? This is very important because we want to educate the society to become become progressive, open-minded, and can tolerate everyone, right? And we think this is kind of reimagination art is the best way for us to do so, right? So what I'm going to bring to today's debate is about three things. First, about status quo and empowerment. Second, about the harm of living this kind of regretting this, and then lastly, how we get into those empowerment at the very end. And so going to my first thing about this kind of status quo and empowerment, right? We think the empowerment is meaning that we are giving help to those who are struggle, to those who minority group itself, right? So let's see what is in the status quo right now. Note that Hollywood movie or entertainment industry is very, very patriarchal, very sexist, very racist, because they are male and white dominated, right? That's why they tend to create a movie that favor themselves. But currently they have changed, right? Because the trend of the rise of this kind of progressivity art, right? Because they are trying to correlate correlate the demand coming from the society. That's why this is a thing that they currently do, right? And we think this is the thing that we want to protect, because currently they can educate the staff itself, right? They can educate the society through this kind of progressive movies, right? So that's why for the sake of the empowerment, this can be done, and we don't want to lose this kind of progress in the status quo right now. So going to my second thing, why then it is harmful the moment that we regret, or even we don't want to apply this kind. First, we think it's very sad for us to lose the audience of education, right? Because we think without the reimagination, you in the status quo right now, they will be only campaigning about this kind of education. They campaigning about how good the LGBT or normalizing the LGBT, right? But this is not something that people can attract or people interest, right? Because note that human, they are willing to study about something that is entertaining or related to their own childhood, right? So that's why in their side of the house, the moment that they only do campaign, for example, the progress is not going to happen, right? And the second, we think this is also sad. The moment that we live in that having a kid, that they live in entertainment where Cinderella cannot be independent, where Cinderella always need man, right? Because not that the moment that a kid watch this kind of movie, this kind of patriarchal movie, they will normalize the patriarchal itself, right? Why then this happen? Because a child, they tend to watch a very, very cool movie, or a movie that is related to their social life. So that's why coming from that, this manifests to the sociological of this kind of kid, that they will always remember that actually we are living in the patriarchal society, and this is a normal thing that we have to accept, right? So that's why we don't want this kind of kids to have those kind of mindset, and by normalizing this kind of patriarchal society. So that's why we don't want to hamper this kind of progress. That's why we don't regret this kind of thing itself, right? So going to my last thing, right? Why then this kind of empowerment will happen under outside of the house? How can we get this kind of empowerment? 3 layers. First, reimagination art characterization is a movie that is very famous. That's why such a Cinderella movie, that's why, for example, the moment that Cinderella established a feminist Cinderella, this could trigger people to watch it, right? Because people tend to miss their own childhood, right? They miss to watch the progress coming from the Cinderella, how Cinderella will looks like later in the current status quo right now, or whatever it is, right? So that's why they are willing to watch, and they are willing to watch this kind of Cinderella new version, because they want to feel those kind of nostalgic, and this is the exclusivity that we get under outside the house, which is lead to this kind of big audience, right? Because people know Cinderella is famous, that's why people want to watch it. Second layer, the moment that they watch it, they will be educated through the time they're watching them. For example, as we know, a movie and art equal to a great picturization, or a picturization regarding to how feminist works, how this kind of LGBT face, and etc. Right? Note that movie also play a big role in the society because it consumed every day by the people. Right? What then is money? What then this manifest to? This manifest to the at least society know what is happening in our society, in our movement itself. Right? Society know what we want, and society at least they don't see us as a weird movement, as a weird thing that they in the end of the day that they will exclude it, right? On the outside of the house, because people are normalizing this kind of thing, or they at least understand, at least they know our existence itself, right? To the extent of this, like if we like creating every famous movie into progressive, like for example at our best case scenario, every movie is turned into the progressive. This is a great thing, right? Because it lead to the normalization of people, that for example, in the movie itself, for example, a woman can be a boss, or for example, a woman can be an agent. They can reach like what Charlie Angels has portrayed to you, right? We think this could trigger the society, that they think, oh, a girl that become a boss and agent and rich is a normal thing, right? Or more often, the moment that they see this kind of girl in the real life, that they actually looks like the Charlie Angel, they will amaze, right? They are not going to, like for example, judging them that the woman cannot be that rich or whatever it is. No, right? Because they watch Charlie Angels is so great, so good, so cool. That's why they are as tend to amazed by the action coming from this girl in the real life itself, right? And the third layer, at least under outside of the house, we are very very easy to seek for the audience, right? Unlike the side of the house, that is very hard to actually promote those kind of unpopular art itself, right? And also, even if under outside of the house, this is also rebuttal toward them, that they say they are afraid that there will be rainbow washing or whatever it is, right? We think it is okay under outside of the house, even if there is a rainbow washing, because it is okay, right? Because I think the moment that they are do this kind of thing, they will be get backlash. They will be get backlash itself, right? They realize that actually the moment that they do a rainbow washing, they will get backlash, and that's why they tend to actually educate their own staff to actually anti-gay or whatever it is, because the moment that they do, people will throw head toward them, and that's why we're proud to oppose. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for Snag. Continuing F's case, second F, please.
Okay, am I audible?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for gender pronouns, you can use here him. Let me set up my timer. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. My speech will consist of 3 different parts. Number 1, I will give response to all of the claims coming from the first speaker of the opposition team. And the second thing is I'm going to talk about what does the minority wants, which is something that the first speaker from the opposition team didn't mention. And the third thing is I will explain to you further about why does the proposal will fail to fulfill the demands from the minority. Moving on to the first part of my speech, there are 3 claims that I'm going to rebut here. Number 1, they say that it is okay if Disney gets the credit because it'll make them happy, it'll make them be enforced to make more movies that are having the value of equality, raising the minority, and etc. But I'm going to explain to you why this is problematic in the first place. Number 1, we believe that Disney is a company which is very, very profit oriented, right? The reason why they are making movies is not solely to educate people about the minority or to educate people about equality, but it's more about the profit, right? And let's take a look at the times where they are making Black Panther movies, right? Which is dominated by all the Black actors and etc. And the thing is, these movies is not necessarily are published towards the whole majority of people, but it's uh, the movie is having a market segmentation which is more directed towards the minority, which is the Black people itself, right? So we believe that since they are making movies that are talking about these minorities, which is involving these minorities, eventually a lot of these black people will watch the movies in the theater because they think that, oh, this movie represents us. And the we believe that this is not exactly going to uh, hinder or to erase the racism, etc. Because how can you educate people uh, who are coming from the minority and teach them about equality? We believe that this is not the main purpose of Disney, and therefore we believe that it is very, very not okay to do this. And the second thing is we doubt that there will be a further education that that Disney will give to the whole society, especially about the essence of equality and such, because in the first place they are doing it only for the profit, right? And the second thing is they say that, oh, kids will have the same patriarchal value from the movie if we don't have this reimagination and etc. But let's take a look at the essence of reimagination. Reimagination means that you are making a slightly new thing out of a story that has been published. So the story is not totally changed. It is the same story, but you have different actors who will play that. You will have different events that will that are not really that far from the original one, right? We believe that the same patriarchal value, or at least the same old values that the society demands, we will always be there. The kind of patriarchal value will always still be there. Like for example, this Cinderella, the gay Cinderella who are still wishing for someone to help him, or wishing for a magic to help him to do something. So this kind of value is actually not really going to be erased totally, which is why we need to create new arts which have different values, which will be more encouraging for these minorities, right? And the third thing is they say that people will eventually learn out of this arts and etc. Ladies and gentlemen, the essence of arts and entertainment is to entertain people. It is very, very hard for us to educate people, or to at least make changes in the society, especially when the movies are not directed towards the whole majority, but to the minorities. Because in the first place, the main goals of this agency is to for profit, right? So we don't think that educating minorities about how minority life is important is going to make a huge significance in our status quo, right? So moving on to the second part of my speech, which is what does the minority wants? There are three things that the minority wants, we believe. Number one is the credits for their arts, especially for the art makers. The kind of art that these art makers made is inspired by their identity and also their life events, right? And since art is is a form of expression, these art makers, especially coming from the minority, they want to express this. They want to express their identity, their life events, their backgrounds through the arts that they created, right? To get credits. So what are the credits for? It leads us to number two. It is to push for their movement, right? It is very, very important, especially for this majority, because have you ever seen white men create arts to advocate for their race or gender? No, it's always the minority who are doing that. And why are they doing that? Number one, because the platform or the industry itself has been dominated by the majority, right? So it's hard for them to take places. And the second thing is because they want to take space for themselves in the industry. They want to have the ability, the strength to create the arts that they want, to eventually push for the movement of equality that they are having this whole time, right? And the third thing, what they want is really a role model. They want someone to look up to. When you are a kid, you want someone that you want to be as a grow up, right? And this is very, very important because this role model will act as their aspiration to live. For example, if you are a black boy living in a black suburban and you see a black directors directing a great movie, it'll sparks inspiration, and it'll give the purpose to to one's life, right? So this is the role model is very important. So the third, moving on to the third part of my speech, right? Why does the proposal fail to fulfill the demand of this minority? Number one, because they won't get the credits. Let's take a look at how the reimagination right now looks like, right? Right? Like for example, the what is it again? The Little Mermaid, who are being reimaginated. But the thing that they change is only the main actor, which is a black girl, right? And it doesn't mean that the whole story is changed. It doesn't mean that the directors or the wardrobe changers are the uh, uh, black people. No, but it's only the main actor, and the goal is to once again for the profit, right? So we believe that although this main actor will get a little bit of credit, but still the filmmakers, the agency, the directors, which is the white man who will get the credit, right? And other than that, the story itself is not original. How can you push for a movement when the story that you are acting in is not coming from your background? It's not coming from how the background of life looks like, but it's more about the story that was created by the old stories which is made by the black men. We believe that they're not only going not to get credits, the movement is not going to help, and we believe that this motion is very uh, we support this motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next, second negative, please.
Yeah, hello, am I audible?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wait, let me set my timer first. Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to clarify two things. First of all, government never told you about what minority want, but suddenly it came up from the second speakers. There's a shifting in their argument. And secondly, we think we talk about credit, and credit, but we already answered it. But let me strengthen it in my argument, right? 3 layers of rebuttals. First of all, they talk about how Disney, for example, getting profit. First of all, we think every company wants profit and it is acceptable, right? Also, the profit at the end of the day will be used to create such a new project. For example, like a new progressive movement movie, right? But secondly, I think the profit is not the main problem. Why? Because whether or not they get profit, the point is how you can give the mechanizations of how you can empower the minority in our society, right? It's not only talking about profit and so on, which is very trivial. Secondly, when you say that there is a segmentation of consumers, like first of all, the fact that even Indonesian people watch Black Panther means there is a popularity of how this minority black people popularized by the film, so means that our goal here is happening. And secondly, but even if there is a segmentation, we think the minority also watch this, right? But we think like at least the minority felt like they are acknowledged by these people as they are the main character who are acknowledged as heroes. And thirdly, we also already say how even if let's say this film is not very popular, the production house, for example, all of the staff already has been brainwashed. For example, all of the people involved in, they realize how minority, for example, also have these rights to be empowered, right? And thirdly, I know that the government want to give minority credit, but let me clarify this. They never talk us about how the clear mechanizations that want to make. What kind of mechanization? Campaign? Can you explain how inequality between black and white, for example, can be explained through campaign to the young people or even to the children? No, you never explain those things, means your mechanization should be debunked. But secondly, you also say like the imagination only give white men credit. We think we give more credit to the minority because we give them exposure as the main character in the film, but also while realizing that the white man creating such a film, we know that the progressiveness already happened where the men of white realize that they should empower the black man people, for example, right? Jump to the arguments. what is arguments? There are types of arguments. First of all, what happened under the absence of these reimaginations, and secondly, what the long-term benefit we can give you, but they don't. The government cannot do. Right? What happened with the absence of reimagination? First of all, we're going to talk about the popularity of the film. For example, like Cinderella, she is known to be like a very weak girl, depend on men, right? Like she is a girl who lived with her cruel mother and sister. One day she lived happily because accidentally she married this Prince Charming. But what is the truth behind this film, right? Women those days in the 90s, for example, they undergo like domestic violence, for example, from the family. They were sexually unequal. As women have to do like house chores, for example, women is good when they stay at home all day, obeying their tiger parenting and so on, right? But how come one day Cinderella get happiness? Because she obey everything, she accept everything, and accidentally she marry a man which she depends on, right? And you see that this kind of perception is seen by the modern day's children. What can they conclude after watching this? First of all, we think that the conclusion will lead to harm. What is the harm? We think they will assume that happiness is a girl is when you always obey everything, you normalize domestic violence, you always keep in silent, right? But do you think this is acceptable in modern days? No, it is not relevant with the modern era. Even in reality, domestic violence is happening, and therefore we have to create such a progressive movement where women should encourage each other to break this culture, right? So why the imagination of this film is very important by not only like for example making the new one. It is because of the popularity of the film, right? For example, like we know there's like new character of princess such as Elsa, for example. But people will not forget about his her nostalgic movie, for example, like Cinderella, who is picturized as a weak woman, right? Therefore, without the reimagination of these old movies, there will be double standing. For example, like by Disney, their fans will not be sure whether Disney want to support feminists or not, whether they encourage minority or not, right? So we gotta reshape this kind of understanding that has been said by the Disney, for example, at the very first place, so that society will understand. Oh, time has changed, the mindset has changed, even the nostalgic movie that I believe in has changed. Therefore, it will change their mindset and it also relevant to the long-term benefit that we're going to explain, right? We think our first speaker already told you how children will be influenced by this kind of reimagination of them. But we also how the older people and the minority group will be empowered by this thing, right? First of all, how this reimagination will change older people mindset. First of all, we think like this film is not only limited to like children movies, right? We know like there's also like Charlie Angels and so on. We think all people know that Charlie Angel was watched by those people who maybe now on their 30s, for example. So the recreation of this movie will attract them because it leads them to their nostalgic when they are younger, right? We also know like Charlie Angels portray as a woman who work for men. The Bosley are men at the end of the day, at the old days, and they are just the field workers, right? So we think by creating this movie, we're giving new features as if like progressive movement by giving them like woman bossly, right? How we influence older people. We will invite them to their nostalgic memory about certain movie. They will certainly watch this, right? And secondly, we will give them exposure about how their favorite characters now become a different character who embrace those features of progressiveness. Hence, they realize how women also can be boss and leader, for example. And thirdly, this mindset will be instilled by understanding how the concept toward women has changed as time passed by. They're not only working for men anymore, maybe yes, in the old times, but now they are also can be leaders, right? But at the same time, we think this is also empowering the minority. How is it? First of all, we think government already told you how the involvement of minority group in the term of actors or cultures can improve the popularity. Thank you. It supports our argument, right? We think the popularity of this reimaginations film can attract many watchers, right? At the end of the day, therefore, by many people seeing this film, the empowerment will more likely happen in our side of the house because all of the minority and the majority will see that, oh, there's equality now, there is progressive now by the features that given in the film. For example, we know like the how high popularity of woman empowerment in Charlie Angels with the new features of woman Bosley, for example, and also like the ending of how all women are united as one. So it leads people who watch this to not underestimating women anymore. It leads people who see this as, oh, women should be united each other, right? So we think this kind of empowerment that we want to achieve, right? link back to our goals, right? We think the outweigh of this reimagination is more to the result and change that we can make in society. To be clear, we already provide you all of the harms benefit for both majority and minority. We already give empowerment to the minority. We already show you how our mechanizations also will lead the majority to also support the progressiveness of the minority. Meanwhile, government never tell you about this thing. They cannot provide you any kind of harm, any kind of benefits. They only talk about how this is giving profit, how this is giving profit. But ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear that we talk about how we can change the perspective of society. By all of the opinion that we will give in, we believe that we should win this debate. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, second Neg. Last substantive from Av, third speaker. Here.
Okay, let me set up my timers. Before I go on to my speech, my preferred apa sih namanya itu? Gender pronouns is he or him. Wait, I don't think there's no POI. Okay, so I'm gonna start my speech in 1, 2, 3. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will have two clashes and also worst case, best case scenario analysis, right? In each of those clashes, it will already have rebuttals integrated into them. So moving on to the first clashes that occurred, which will represent minorities, right? This is basically what we had this back and forth talk pull, right? Minority in our side of the house, minorities have always had a hard time to be represented, right, in the media. They don't have representation to cling on. That has the same and this representation doesn't have the same hardships as them. Having their own characters or art that is built from the ground up is going to be great for their representation. But the problem with reimagination or reimagining is that it wiping the histories of their characters is really hard. These characters are hundreds of years old, like Batman, Superman, right? If we see the status quo, for example, like the comic book industry, the comic book industry has been struggling ever since they tried to reimagine certain characters. For example, Superman being black, or some other superheroes being gay, so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, the implication of reimagining is that they are only going to be used to quote unquote save what already exists, to save the already existing characters, not to actually change their hardships, their hardships, which is the most important point we should note. This means that representation of minorities and progressive values will not happen to a great extent in the opposition world if compared to government world, because at the end of the day, you can only change so much, right? But you can't change like how this kid is from Afghanistan, for example, right? You can't change that. So there is no like representation through their hardships, only representation through their skin tones, representation to what sexual partner they want. Moreover, opposition hasn't rebutted anything about hindering imagination, right? Because at the end of the day, reimagining still has boundaries. You cannot make Ariel talk about the destruction that America brought to Afghanistan. You cannot make Ariel talk about how Indonesians are treated poorly by South Koreans or something like that, right? There is still boundaries set, because at the end of the day, these old arts were made in that in certain eras, which cannot contain what we want to convey. Moving on to the second clash, which will likely succeed. Why is this important? Because at the end of the day, which will gain more audience, so that we could have our progressive values heard. I think both sides wants this, right? So not only because reimagining leads to little representation of progressive values, reimagining also means changing the old character, the old music, the old whatever, and more than likely, people has had decades of memories with them, and this is said over and over again by the opposition. We agree with that. They have decades of memories. So when they are changed, there's going to be a backlash from those people who are not necessarily against progressive values, but because their characters that they've loved for and these characters that they've grown up with is suddenly changed, right? People will see it as a way, as aggressive way to their memories, basically, right? So even if they are not even if they are not necessarily against these progressive values, us actually spread what we want or spread our values. And this only happens in oppositions because they would want to actively change these old characters. Meanwhile, we want to make new ones and make new memories with them, right? Now, notice how this clash is clashing with first opposition that stated that reimagining movies will bring more people. We agree that it could, but it also means that there will be more people that have emotional connection with these characters. It means that we have to change characters that are already actively, that are already in people's memories, and we'll have to actively go against them, leading to a hard time for us to educate them, right? Moreover, the first opposition said that kids will see these old patriarchal movies and they will learn from it. We say that exactly because the opposition wants to reimagine these old movies, then these kids will be intrigued by the old version as well. Of course, there's not going to be Ariel, that's it. There's going to be new Ariel or something like that. So it means that there's an old version of it. On their side of the house, these problems will occur because people or kids will realize, oh, there's another version of this, right? Let's compare that to our side of the house where we have new movies, new comics that represent and bring progressive values. Kids will only learn about these values, but not exposed to old patriarchal values. Second opposition tried to argue that if these old movies were not changed, people will still have these old values. We say that people generally don't like these old values, right? But the problem, the biggest problem that exists is how kids will actually, see these old patriarchal movies that they don't want, right? That opposition don't want. So in their side of the house, it's actually more detrimental to the growth of the kids because at the end of the day, even if you remake those old movies, there's still going to be the old copies of it. Meanwhile, if we don't touch these old movies, people will slowly lose interest in them, and we can actually use newer movies that has better values so that kids will actually only learn from that. So what is the worst case and best case scenario? In our side of the house, the best case is that we'll be able to give a great representation to minorities that are also wholly original, right? So they can have this thing that they hold. Because if we are given a nation, we wouldn't have this attachment to it, right? We have to build it our own. So originality will have better impact, and we'll be able to easily push our progressive values because we're not going against people's fond memories. The opposition's best case is that no one's gonna be mad about their figure changing, but minorities will still not have that original representation that they truly need. They will only have this reskinned representation that doesn't have the same background, the same hardships that they felt. And because of that, we are very proud. I'm just gonna pose. Okay then.
All right, thank you very much. Third affirmative, and for the last substantive for the debate, third next, please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, wait, I will start my timer. Well, I don't need to say my preferred. Well, I have my preferred here. There. Wait a minute. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, please notice that since the beginning up until now, please educators, look at your paper that we can clearly see that the affirmative side of the House has failed to win this debate because of 3 important things. First, they didn't engage to the burden that we have given to them, that is about challenging the fundamental culture that is already instilled. And then second, they didn't explain to you about how, what would happen if there are no reimagination, because in fact, in reality, right now, in the status quo, we already have this reimagination. So they didn't engage to that. And the third and the most crucial one, it's actually pretty funny. It's because they are backlashing to their own argument. First, they said that, okay, because our proposal failed because the minority wants is supposed to be about, oh, the story is supposed to be original, but then they bring up the Black Panther, which is actually a fiction, which is not based on any historical, or let's say about an important figure of the African community, right? It's first. And second, Black Panther itself is popular. We know Black Panther because it's because of Marvel, which is already owned by Disney. So it actually consists of the promotion that they are currently saying that it is bad, but they actually champion it again. So they have actually failed to win this debate because of that. But then again, let's just go back and say, what if we should still consider them? So first, I would say individual rebuttal, and then I will bring up my clashes. So first, they said that we didn't engage about the hindering imagination and etc. Well, I believe that the second speaker of our side has already engaged that, but okay, let's try it. So regarding the hindering imagination, no, it is not available. It is not a burden that we actually have to answer, because we need to because we need to actually consider this. When you are making a character, yes, okay, you explain it, but when the characters already exist, but you are trying to slip in the new angle, you are trying, let's say that you are trying to portray a feminist Cinderella, right? Well, you need to present a feminist point of view, right? You cannot just, okay, use the original creator that made Cinderella based on the patriarchal culture that say, okay, Cinderella are beautiful, that's why the boys want her like that. No, we cannot say that, because okay, people when they are trying to modify a new character, they need to put in their point of view, and that itself, it creates new challenge for them to actually implore, okay, how do we keep this interesting while instilling this social values, right? That's why we say that that is not hindering imagination. And regarding the promotion itself, which is obviously ridiculous, they said that, okay, we cannot promote it because because Disney will only focus on the profit, right? But we say that no, Disney already focus on the social values itself. Because why? Because even if they also prioritize the profit, they need to consider it, because taking a huge step like that, like making Halle Berry the new main character of the Ariel, the Little Mermaid, it takes risk, right? And in the process of taking that risk, is that first they will actually have to consider regarding, okay, if we want to take this step, we need to consider like our staff, they cannot be racist, because we need to interact with one another, like, and one, that's instilling education too. And second, even if there are, like, let's say not all of them are promoting racial justice or that, it will actually backlash, because it won't do that, because when they create, let's say, movies about LGBT, but they are homophobic, then they will get backlash, and it will bring impact to their career. That's why it won't happen. So regarding the clashes, who can achieve progress, we have already given you we have already given you an explanation. How we achieve progress is by challenging the fundamental culture. We say that Cinderella is built upon the culture of patriarchy, and Cinderella is the produce of Hollywood, and Hollywood is built upon that same culture, right? And because of that, we say that by reimagining this character, the one that has already contained those values, but are still popular in this modern era, we are challenging the culture that are still there. We are challenging that, okay, we are making a feminist Cinderella, because we are saying that, okay, Cinderella is a strong woman who can endure the hardships that she get. No, not to focus that okay, Cinderella is only chosen and can gain happiness not because of her hardship, but because she is chosen by the man because of her beauty, right? That's why we say that we have already challenged this fundamental culture. Meanwhile, on their side of the house, they didn't challenge it. Also, okay, even if they make new movies, the culture is still there, and they said that okay, minority should just focus on minority, right? But then again, they don't engage with the majority, which is the most important one, because they are the one who are needed to be educated about the equality, right? And then second, regarding who can favor the minority, we say that we have one discussion. Absolutely, because we say that through this reimagination, um, we have favored them because first we gave them the representation, we gave them the exposure, and that's just the main character. Let's say about the credit that they have already seen that it seems the problematic or something. Well, the credit itself, like let's say the media, they are attracting people, especially regarding different things. Like let's say that okay, we know there's Cinderella, but then there is feminist Cinderella, right? So we tend to be attracted to the feminist side. We say that okay, why is it feminist Cinderella? What is different from the previous Cinderella? And then we want to search okay, how is feminist Cinderella? Who is the brain behind the feminist Cinderella? And that itself is that must be a feminist because she is the one who understand about the feminism. So that actually gives them credit, and that will actually make them well known, right? Not only that, but then okay, with giving this representation, we are acknowledging them, we are opening new door because we are actually emphasizing their significance in our society, in our entertainment industry. And then second, it's about challenging the current culture. Why? Because who can favor the minority is the one who can actually try and push them towards the pathway of equality, right? We say that we challenge the current cartel, and then we say that by doing this reimagination thing, uh, we say that okay, we are instilling social values that are supposed to be there, that are supposed to be prioritized inside inside the movies itself, and it will actually be instilled inside the society's mind. That's why we say that we are challenging the current culture, and even say that okay, we are even say that okay, it is hard to do, but then again, it is a challenge itself. And then regarding the education and instilling new mindset, yes, we are educating because the kids, they are the kids right now. Not only that, we are able to bring nostalgic feeling for the people who already watch this, but we actually bring this new experience for the kids, not only for the kids, for the black kids out there, but for say white kids out there, because they know that okay, this is what yeah they don't okay, this is what the princesses are. But then again, they also know that okay, this is our women, this is what women or princess should look like, not princess who bow down to prince. And then that's why we say that we have won this debate, not only because the government has failed to do the three things that I mentioned earlier, but again because our worst scenario is just staying in the status quo, meanwhile there's are no progress at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Third Neg. For reply, upper reply, please. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Mhm.
Hello.
Yes, you are.
Okay, sorry. I think my connection is a bit, yeah, a bit ugly. So tell me if I get disconnected or something. So, wait, setting my timer. Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Three things that I'm going to bring. First, the mistake coming from the government. Second, who can betterly teach the society about our movement, and the third about the importance itself. Right, those three reasons are the reason why we should win this debate. First, the mistake coming from the government. First, note that government never engaged to our burden. Meanwhile, we have always engaged toward them. What if happen if we don't have any audience? Why then rainbow wash won't happen under outside of the house? When they never engage to us, why then we can lose the progress? Why then it is okay for us to lose the progressivity coming from the status quo? Why then it is okay for this kind of children to live under the scenario of patriarchal society itself? B, then their benefit will never work because they never tell us why then this kind of credit that will be given toward the minority can give a great impact toward the community itself, right? So their mechanism is not worked, so that's why the benefit is not worked in the end of the day. And see, government always complaining toward us about the commercialization, about how Disney will get credit or whatever it is. Meanwhile, we as the opposition side of the house, we have already told you that even if Disney get credit, it is okay for us to do so because this become an incentive toward the Disney to see us as a beneficial, right? So that's why they are willing to create more movie that include our value. So that's why a lot of people will in the end of the day will be much more educated under a set of the house, right? So going to my second thing, who can teach a better society about our movement, right? Government told us that they want the minority to establish an art or whatever it is, so they can get this kind of credit, right? And also they stated to us that they under a set of the house, people are not going to be educated because it is hard for them to actually understand about the movie itself, right? Note that this kind the second point has already debunked by the argument coming from the first speaker of opposition, because we already told you that even if we don't have any audience, it is okay under us out of the house, because what we can target is the staff itself, right? The staff that is willing to create a great art. That's why they are willing to understand and learn about our movement. So that's why at least we can educate this kind of stuff itself, right? So let's hear about what opposition have bring to you into this debate, right? We already told you how the step-by-step analysis on how we can educate the society, right? From A, coming from the famous movie that trigger people to have this kind of nostalgic feeling. That's why they are willing to watch it. B, we already told you that the characterization of art itself that is being have a real big role in the society because it consumed every day. That's why people in society know at least they will understand and they will normalize our values, right? And the C, at least we have already told you, even if we don't have audience, we can target the stuff itself, right? So whether or not we have an audience or no, we still can educate the people about our movement, right? Note that until the second speaker of the government, they never tell us on how the step-by-step analysis to achieve this kind of education toward this kind of people, on how we could achieve this kind of progress under the side of the house. Meanwhile, we have already told you on how we can get this kind of empowerment, on how people will be much more progressive under a set of the house itself, right? So, so going to my last thing about the importance itself, right? First, opposition champion us about the credit that they will use to push the value of their movement that I told you before. I think government already I think we have already told you that educating a large number of people and LGBT itself will be much more important because we actually engage a lot of people to actually understand about our movement itself, right? And not because in their side of the house this kind of things won't work because they only championing the one individual that is not famous, so no people's going to watch their art itself, right? And the second, they are championing about the exploration itself, right? They say that opposition never can explore because there is a line that we cannot cross to create an art itself, right? Meanwhile, we have already told you that this kind of credit or exploration will happen under us of the house because it is very hard for us to correlate on how we can create Cinderella that living in the patriarchal society to become a feminist. It is very hard and need a lot of creativity itself, right? And even if there is no exploration, it is better under outside of the house because what we want to champion is on how we can educate the society itself. So that's why we should win this debate. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Negative reply. To close the debate, affirmative reply. Here.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
Okay, let me set up my timer. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We believe that the proposition team deserves to win while the opposition team deserves to lose. But first of all, let's take a look at their main case, right? Number one, they say they really rely on the kindness of this huge agency to make arts about these minorities, right? But we believe that it is not going to happen because they are doing it not because they care, but it's only for profit, which is what the second speaker has already told you, right? And also, not all agency wants to do it. They don't want to change the situation because some of these companies like what they used to, like for example, the company of DC, who are creating Batwoman, but still they are portraying the women as someone who is masculine, right? And the second thing that their case is that they are assuming that people will learn and the art will make changes. They are assuming this kind of thing without even a clear mechanization on why does these people will learn at the end of the day, and how can the kind of arts, the reimagination will eventually change the situation that are happening in the status quo, right? They are talking only about the core within values of, for example, gay Cinderella, but they didn't really talk about what does the implication of this movie to the society. Will they learn from this movie? We believe that it is not, because the first intention of this company is to make the movie for a certain market segmentation, which is the gay community, and it will only be an echo chamber, which is the value will be engraved only in the gay community itself and not to the majority, right? And the third thing that they bring into this debate is that, oh, this reimagination will empower the minority movement and etc. We believe that empowerment will only happen when the majority understands about the minority situation, about their walks of life, their hardships, right? We believe that this empowerment will not happen in their sides, number one, because the movie is made for entertainment purposes, for profit, and not to blame the majority for the discrimination of that they did for the minority, right? Because if they do so, they will lose profit. And number two, even if yes, they make this movie for for uh, they make this movie, we believe that at the end of the day, reimagination means the story is made by the white man and not the minority. Changing the main character into a black man doesn't mean that you are expressing the value of the white community itself, right? So we believe this already failed at the end of the day. And also, they didn't rebut us about the possibility of children learns the old values coming from this imagination, the imagined movies, right? And they also didn't even rebut about the possibility of people resisting change because people have attachment to old character, right? And other than that, they also didn't explain about the characterization of big agency and what the minority wants, which is very, very important. And we don't understand what kind of thing that they really, really want to advocate in this debate, right? So we believe they deserve to lose. Let's take a look at our case. We deserve to win because it is clear what we have already explained that it is clear that we have explained that the minority wants things, which is at credits, movements, and also role models, right? And we are going to do it through incentivizing them to make their own movies. And this is very important because number one, it will create them more independence, create more space in order for them to making art. So if they want to do empowerment, they can do it in their own way. And the second thing is, it is not taking the majority space. You are not forcing this huge agency to use black women and get rid of the white actors. And it will prolong their movement because they are playing at their own lane. There won't be any comments coming from the white community. And the third thing, we believe that the empowerment will eventually not become a jargon only, which is what this huge company wants to get profit, right? So we deserve to win. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That is the end of the debate. I believe that the